Jimmy Haslam just dropped a bombshell that has the entire NFL world in absolute shock. The Browns owner, who's been silent for weeks while speculation swirled about Shedeur Sanders' future in Cleveland, finally broke his silence, and what he revealed changes everything. This isn't just another quarterback controversy. This is the Browns making a statement that could reshape their entire franchise direction. After years of failed experiments and broken promises, Haslam's latest move with Shedeur Sanders is either genius or complete madness, and the fallout is already beginning. Let's rewind to how we got here, because to understand why Jimmy Haslam's announcement is so explosive, you need to understand the absolute chaos that's been brewing in Cleveland for months. When the Browns made the shocking decision to draft Shedeur Sanders in the 2025 NFL Draft, it wasn't just another quarterback pick, it was a statement. This was Deshaun Sanders' son, a player who came with more hype, more expectations, and more media attention than any Browns draft pick in recent memory. The organization knew exactly what they were getting into. They weren't just drafting a quarterback, they were drafting a brand, a personality, and all the drama that comes with the Sanders family name. From day one, the situation was complicated. The Browns still had Deshaun Watson under that massive guaranteed contract, one of the worst deals in NFL history that's haunted this franchise since the moment ink hit paper. Watson's performance had been disappointing at best, disastrous at worst, and the organization was stuck between honoring their financial commitment and doing what was best for winning football games. Then you had veteran backup options on the roster, players who'd been in the league, who understood NFL systems, who were supposed to provide stability if Watson continued to struggle. But Shedeur Sanders wasn't drafted to sit and wait his turn. That's not how the Sanders family operates. From the moment he arrived in Cleveland, there was an energy around him that was impossible to ignore. Teammates noticed it. Coaches saw it. The media circus that followed him was unlike anything the Browns facility had experienced. Practice reports would leak about Sanders' arm talent, his leadership presence, his confidence that bordered on arrogance, but in a way that made you believe rather than doubt. And hovering over all of this was Deshaun Sanders himself, prime time, a Hall of Famer who wasn't going to sit quietly while his son rode the bench. The 2025 season started with Watson as the starter, as everyone expected. But by week 5, after another embarrassing loss where the offense looked completely lost, the calls for change were deafening. Cleveland sports radio was brutal. Fans were showing up to games with signs demanding Sanders. The national media was running daily segments about whether the Browns were wasting a franchise quarterback on the bench while a failed experiment continued to start. The pressure was building to a breaking point. Then came week 8. Watson went down with an injury, not season-ending, but enough to sideline him for several weeks. And just like that, Shedeur Sanders got his opportunity. His first start was against a tough divisional opponent, primetime television, the whole world watching to see if primetime's son could handle the moment. And what happened next shocked everyone. Sanders didn't just play well, he played like a veteran. He threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and led the Browns to a convincing victory. The kid looked poised, confident, and most importantly, he looked like he belonged. But here's where it got messy. Watson was expected to return after a few weeks. The organization had been clear that he was still their guy, that Sanders was just filling in temporarily. But after Sanders won 3 straight games, after the offense suddenly looked dynamic and explosive, after the locker room clearly rallied around the rookie, how could they go back? Jimmy Haslam found himself in an impossible position. He'd invested $230 million guaranteed in Watson. That money doesn't just disappear. But he also had a young quarterback who was winning games and capturing the hearts of a fan base that had been starving for hope. The media storm that followed was unlike anything Cleveland had seen. Deshaun Sanders started doing interviews, carefully worded, but clearly advocating for his son to remain the starter. Former players weighed in, analysts debated endlessly, and through all of this, Jimmy Haslam stayed silent.
Week after week, as speculation intensified, as rumors swirled about internal divisions within the organization, as reports surfaced about Watson being unhappy with his demotion, Haslam said nothing publicly. That silence created a vacuum that the media filled with every possible theory and rumor. Behind closed doors, according to multiple sources, the situation was even more complicated than anyone realized. The coaching staff was split. Some believed Watson deserved another chance once healthy, that you don't give up on a talent like that because of a rough stretch. Others saw Sanders as clearly the better option and thought continuing with Watson was organizational stubbornness, refusing to admit a mistake. The front office was evaluating not just football performance, but financial implications, contract restructuring possibilities, trade scenarios. And the locker room, while publicly united, had its own divisions forming between Watson supporters and Sanders believers. Shedeur Sanders kept winning. By the time the regular season ended, he'd started 9 games and gone 7-2. The Browns made the playoffs for the first time in years, largely because of Sanders' performance down the stretch. He wasn't perfect, he made rookie mistakes, there were games where his inexperience showed, but the trajectory was undeniable. This kid was special, and everyone knew it. The question wasn't whether Sanders could play, the question was whether the Browns would have the courage to commit to him fully, knowing what it meant for Watson's contract and ego. The playoff game was the moment everything crystallized. Sanders led the Browns on a dramatic fourth-quarter comeback, throwing the game-winning touchdown with less than a minute remaining. The city of Cleveland erupted. It was the kind of moment franchises are built around, the kind of performance that defines careers. And as Sanders celebrated on the field, as his teammates mobbed him, as Deshaun Sanders stood in the stands with tears streaming down his face, everyone knew the decision had essentially been made. How could you not build around this? But Jimmy Haslam still didn't speak publicly. Even after that playoff victory, even after the season ended with Sanders firmly established as the fan favorite, Haslam maintained his silence. The speculation reached fever pitch. Was Cleveland going to trade Watson? Were they going to try some kind of competition in training camp? Would they commit fully to Sanders or hedge their bets? Every day brought new rumors, new reports from unnamed sources, new theories about what the organization was planning. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the league. Jimmy Haslam scheduled a press conference, his first public comments about the quarterback situation since Sanders had taken over the starting role months earlier. The anticipation was incredible. Sports media cleared their schedules, fans gathered watch parties. Everyone knew this was the moment where Cleveland's direction would finally be revealed. And when Haslam stepped to the podium, what he said was both expected and somehow still surprising in its definitive nature.
Haslam didn't hedge. He didn't leave wiggle room. He didn't talk about competitions or evaluations. He stated clearly and unequivocally that Shedeur Sanders is the Cleveland Browns' franchise quarterback moving forward. Not the starter for now, not the guy who earned an opportunity, the franchise quarterback, the player they're building around, the future of the organization. It was the most definitive statement a Browns owner has made about a quarterback in decades, and it immediately changed everything. But Haslam didn't stop there. He addressed the Deshaun Watson situation head-on, something the organization had been dancing around for months. He acknowledged the contract, acknowledged the financial complications, but made clear that football decisions would drive roster construction, not sunk costs. Reading between the lines, it was obvious the Browns were going to find a way to move on from Watson, whether through trade, release, or some creative contract restructuring. Haslam was essentially telling the entire league that Cleveland was willing to eat money to do what was right for winning. The reaction was immediate and intense. Shedeur Sanders posted on social media thanking Haslam and the organization for their belief in him. Deshaun Sanders did a lengthy interview praising Cleveland for having the courage to make the right decision.
Deshaun Watson's camp released a statement expressing disappointment but respecting the organization's choice. And across the NFL, general managers started making phone calls, trying to figure out if Watson was actually available and what Cleveland would want in return. What makes this announcement so significant isn't just about one team's quarterback situation. It's about what it represents for the modern NFL. Jimmy Haslam essentially admitted that the Watson trade and contract was a catastrophic mistake, one of the worst in league history, and that the organization was willing to take unprecedented financial losses to move forward properly. That kind of public acknowledgement from an owner almost never happens. Owners protect their egos. They justify bad decisions. They try to salvage situations even when everyone can see it's not working. Haslam did the opposite, and that takes genuine courage in the ego-driven world of NFL ownership. For the Browns, this changes everything about how they approach the 2026 offseason. They're no longer in quarterback purgatory. They can build an offensive line specifically to protect Sanders' skill set. They can bring in weapons that complement his strengths. They can install an offensive system designed around their franchise quarterback, rather than trying to make things work with whatever veteran is available. After decades of quarterback instability, Cleveland finally has clarity and direction. But this decision also creates massive ripple effects across the league. If the Browns do trade Watson, his destination could swing the balance of power in multiple divisions. Teams that were one quarterback away from contending suddenly have a potential option, even if he comes with baggage and questions. The quarterback market, which was already chaotic heading into 2026, just got even more unpredictable. And other teams with young quarterbacks they're evaluating now have the Browns as a case study in having the courage to commit early when you believe you found your guy. The risk for Cleveland is obvious. Shedeur Sanders played 9 regular season games and 1 playoff game. That's an incredibly small sample size to base a franchise-defining decision on. If Sanders struggles in year 2, if the rookie success was an anomaly, if defenses figure him out and he can't adjust, Haslam will look foolish for committing so definitively, so quickly. The pressure on Sanders is now immense. He's not just the starter, he's the anointed franchise savior, and that's a heavy burden for any young quarterback to carry.
There's also the Deshaun Sanders factor that can't be ignored. By fully committing to Shedeur, the Browns are implicitly accepting that prime time will have opinions, will do interviews, will be part of the narrative surrounding this team. Some organizations would see that as a nightmare. Haslam seems to view it as acceptable collateral damage for having a talented young quarterback. But if things go wrong, if Deshaun becomes critical of the organization, if family drama starts impacting the locker room, Cleveland could find themselves in a media circus that makes the Watson situation look tame by comparison. What's fascinating is how this decision impacts other young quarterbacks around the league who are in similar situations. Teams that have been cautious about committing to unproven signal callers are now watching Cleveland go all in on Sanders after less than a full season of work. Does that embolden other franchises to trust their evaluations earlier? Does it create pressure on organizations still riding with struggling veterans to make changes faster? The Browns just set a precedent that could influence quarterback decisions across the NFL for years. The financial aspect of this cannot be overstated. If Cleveland releases Watson or trades him while eating significant contract money, they're essentially paying 2 quarterbacks, one who's playing elsewhere and one who's leading their team. That impacts their salary cap flexibility for years. It limits their ability to sign premium free agents. It forces creative roster construction to work around a self-imposed financial handicap. But Haslam clearly decided that short-term cap pain is worth long-term quarterback stability, and history might prove him right. For Shedeur Sanders personally, this is both a dream come true and a pressure cooker situation. He's now the guy, not just for this season, but for the foreseeable future. Every decision, every throw, every press conference will be analyzed through the lens of whether Haslam made the right choice. The expectations in Cleveland weren't exactly low before, but now they're absolutely massive. Sanders will need to prove that his rookie success wasn't a fluke, that he can handle defenses adjusting to him, that he can lead this franchise to sustained success rather than just a hot stretch. The Browns fan base is energized in a way they haven't been in decades. Finally, they have a young quarterback they can believe in, an owner willing to make tough decisions, and a clear direction forward. The Watson era is ending, and while it was an expensive disaster, at least it's ending decisively rather than dragging on for years. Cleveland fans have suffered through so much quarterback chaos that just having clarity feels like a victory even before Sanders throws another pass. What happens next will be fascinating to watch. Does Watson get traded before the draft, and if so, where? How does Cleveland use their newfound cap space once they restructure their quarterback situation? What weapons do they bring in to support Sanders? How does the young quarterback handle the pressure of being the franchise cornerstone? These questions will define the Browns' 2026 season and beyond. Jimmy Haslam's announcement wasn't just about confirming a starting quarterback. It was about the Browns finally having the organizational courage to commit to a direction, accept past mistakes, and build for the future rather than trying to salvage the present. Whether this bold move leads to sustained success or becomes another chapter in Cleveland's long history of quarterback failures won't be known for years. But at least now, the Browns know who they are and where they're going. And in a franchise that's been lost in quarterback purgatory for decades, that clarity alone feels revolutionary.